Your turn to bang. 5 seconds remaining.
这老数据秒不死呀，关键是，
好，后排技能太多了，啊什么睡，
感谢菜头鱼，
全是断技能的。
寿司。
把
电狗的分身也能开这个点吗？没开出来。
70分钟应该不行吧？
这边有郑嘉言被
想救
打住了，
被拉住，推了一下救一手上
啊，
这拉好久
，10几秒，
拉多久啊？
10几秒，
他不会直接拉上单杀吧？哎，单拉死了！我操！
好像拉了17秒。
小黑大猛夫，小黑大猛夫。
不是他能直接把一个人拉死呀，班尼。
好像拉了
15
秒还是17秒？
只要不够天火，好吧，他必死。
每秒200伤害。
太普了，被掉卡卡也要死了。我操，2下
掉血掉蓝。
推一下。
没反应了。
它上面写的是13秒，还有状态抗性加成。
哎呦，是电狗，是电狗。
啊，有你看电狗这个英雄就是打到后面是吧，守半天死一波就没了，就这样呀。
电狗有鬼没出杀，好吧，这种感觉。
他只能打前期电狗，现在打后期。
Monday. Welcome back to Harbour Unbox. Today, I am finally able to review AMD's answer to Nvidia's recently released GeForce GTX 1650 Super. Codenamed Navi 14, we finally have the Radeon RX 5500 XT on hand, and while this is technically a day one review, it's not the first 5500 XT review to hit the net. Some lucky reviewers managed to get their hands on OEM versions, which allowed them to test ahead of time, or at least ahead of today's AIB release, where we can test models from Gigabyte and MSI. And their initial results weren't great, but of course without any solid pricing information, it was hard to gauge just how good or bad Navi 14 would be in terms of value, and that's what we plan to work out today. But before we get too far into today's review, today's video is sponsored by Gigabyte and their special end of year offer for Australian and New Zealand customers. Right now, if you buy any Gigabyte X570 motherboard with a Ryzen 7 or Ryzen 9 CPU, you'll be eligible for a free Gigabyte Gen 4 500GB SSD valued at $250. Alternatively, if you purchase a Gigabyte Radeon RX 5700 XT graphics card, you'll receive a bonus Gigabyte M.2 NVMe 512GB SSD, valued at $120. So, for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, so on hand today to evaluate just how good the 5500 XT is, we have two new AIB models on hand for testing. We have one from MSI and one from Gigabyte. MSI sent over their Gaming X model and Gigabyte their Gaming OC version, and I have to say both do look very nice. Now before we jump into the benchmarks, let's just quickly talk about the 5500 XT. The tiny 158mm square die packs just 1,408 cores and 88 texture units, almost 40% fewer than the RX 570. There's also half as many ROPs, and this has reduced the memory bus from 256-bit down to just 128-bit wide, which sees the memory bandwidth halved to 224GB per second. Still, AMD is using GDDR6 memory, and you can purchase the 5500 XT with either 4 or 8GB of VRAM. I have the 4GB model on hand, but I won't be featuring it in this video. Rather, I'll be providing a detailed 4 versus 8GB comparison soon. For now, the focus is on the 8GB version. But getting back to the cores for a moment, they're clocked at 1670 MHz for the base and 1845 MHz for the boost, which means they're clocked 7% higher than 5700 cores. However, because there is a lot less of them, the TDP has been reduced from 180 watts down to 150 watts. Now, there is really no delicate way of putting this, so I'm just going to say it. The 8GB version of the 5500 XT comes in at an MSRP of $200 US, and frankly, that seems like a lot given the specs. The 4GB model, that'll set you back $170, and again, that seems like a lot of money for a 4GB graphics card in very late 2019. Anyway, we'll review the price to performance offered by the 5500 XT towards the end of the video. For now, let's just check out the test system specs and then get into the benchmarks. The test system used includes a Core i9 1900K clocked at 5GHz with 16GB of DDR4 3400 memory, and the exact graphics card models used for testing can be found in the video description. Though, please note the Gigabyte RX 5500 XT Gaming OC was used exclusively for all the 5500 XT testing in this video. Finally, we have 12 games to look at, and all have been tested at 1080p and 1440p using medium to high quality presets or settings. So let's get into the results. First up, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and with the high quality preset enabled at 1080p, the 5500 XT was good for 77 FPS on average. Not bad performance, but not great either given the RX 590 was a little faster and the 1660 Super was almost 20% faster. Even at 1440p we see much the same, and despite the extra VRAM, the 5500 XT can't gain on the 1660 Super here. Here we see that the 5500 XT does manage to edge out the RX 590 in Assassin's Creed Odyssey with an average of 71 FPS, making it 4% faster, or a mere 3 FPS. The 1660 Super was 11% faster, though the 5500 XT was 8% faster than the 1650 Super. Moving to 1440p, and we see very similar margins. The 5500 XT is still on par with the GTX 1660, which also puts it on par with the RX 590 and GTX 1650 Super. So, not a great result here for AMD's new $200 US offering. Using the high quality settings in Red Dead Redemption 2 may have been a mistake with these lower end GPUs, as frame rates are quite low, even at 1080p. Also, please note the 3GB 1060 didn't work as the texture settings were too high, and you can't override memory restrictions in this title. So rather than give the 3GB 1060 an advantage with the medium quality texture setting, I just opted to skip it for this one. Performance at 1080p for the 5500 XT is pretty disappointing. It only matched the RX 580 and the GTX 1650 Super, and things weren't much better at 1440p. Using the high quality settings, the game wasn't really playable, so you'll need to drop down to medium if you hope to play at this resolution with anything less than an RX 5700 or RTX 2060. The 5500 XT did deliver a silky smooth 106 FPS on average at 1080p in World of Tanks, but that really was only enough to see it positioned as a midfield runner in our testing, only matching the 3GB 1060, though it did put it on par with the RX 590, but still a pretty unexciting result. The 1440p results weren't much better. Here it's a fraction slower than the RX 590, and really no better than the much cheaper GTX 1650 Super. Performance in Far Cry New Dawn is typical of what we've seen so far. The 5500 XT is a smidgen quicker than the 590 and just 6% faster than the 1650 Super, which frankly is a pretty miserable result for AMD given they want to charge $200 for this thing. Not much difference at 1440p, 5500 XT and 590 are neck and neck, while the 1660 Super is well out in front, delivering nearly 20% more performance, which isn't great for AMD given Nvidia are only charging 15% more. Here we see that frame rates in Rainbow Six Siege are strong at 1080p using the very high quality preset, which is one notch down from Ultra, though we are manually cranking the render scale back up to 100%. The 5500 XT was still slower than the RX 590 and really not a great deal faster than the much cheaper 1650 Super. Much the same as seen when testing at 1440p, the 5500 XT only manages to keep pace with the GTX 1650 Super and RX 580. Here we see that the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order performance at 1080p is pretty average. Here the 5500 XT is slower than the GTX 1650 Super and the old GTX 1666GB. Basically, it finds itself situated between the 590 and the 580. Moving to 1440p allows the 5500 XT to match the 1650 Super and 3GB 1060. So, yeah, not a particularly great result here either. Using the high quality preset at 1080p in Battlefield 5 allowed the 5500 XT to average 83 FPS in our test, which sadly meant it was only able to match the RX 580 and render just 3 FPS more than the 1650 Super on average. Here we see though that the more limited 4GB VRAM buffer does appear to hurt the 1650 Super at 1440p, and now the 5500 XT is able to deliver 13% more performance with 62 FPS on average. But given it costs 25% more, I wouldn't go getting too excited about this news. The Call of Duty Modern Warfare results are very similar to what we've seen so far. The 5500 XT is basically on par with the RX 590 and GTX 1650 Super. Even at 1440p, the 5500 XT can't get away from the 1650 Super, and it even manages to slip behind the RX 590, so again, not a great result here. Metro Exodus was tested with the ultra quality preset enabled as the 5500 XT and equivalent NVIDIA GPUs averaged over 60 FPS at 1080.
To offer all I have. Wait! Your top tower is under attack! I'm under attack! Yes. Your bottom tower, mate! Get hot to it! God's wish Time to punch! Strike me! You are no match. I swear I shall not squander. The enemy's bottom tower is fallen. To the noble realm, my gratitude. I'll give it my all. I'll risk it. Willing.
Killing spree! Double kill!
Radiant's been fortificated. Don't waste your time. A stronger sacrifice. Coughing. Yes. Your top tower has been denied. At once.
Double kill!
A dark path. The potential for hostile. Time is short. At last. Dire structures are fortified. Yes. enemy's top tower regrets the day it was born. In fate's hands. Is that all?
Dominate! Own it!
An honor. For the greater good. Swiftly now.
Double kill! Dominate! Mega kill! Double kill! Unstoppable! Triple kill!
Realm, I return. Duty calls. Give it up. The enemy's middle tower is fallen. Invisibility! Tis vital! With a will!
I guess they took it first.
With all my heart! First mate!
Double kill!
Source. My poison works its magic.
The 5500 XT came in behind the RX 580, so not exactly a stellar result. It was also 10% slower than the RX 590. Moving up to 1440p saw the 5500 XT drop down to an average of 51 FPS, which again meant it was a few frames slower than the RX 580, though at least in this title it was quite a bit faster than the GTX 1650 Super, especially when looking at the 1% low performance. Here we see that the 5500 XT once again trails the RX 580, this time in F1 2019 at 1080p using the high quality preset. Granted, 121 FPS on average is pretty great gaming performance. It's still less than what you get with a 580, 590, GTX 1660 or 1660 Super. The 5500 XT does match the 580 at 1440p, making it 5 to 6 FPS slower than the 590 and 11% slower than the 1660 Super. Last up we have Gears 5, and here the 5500 XT is able to match the RX 590 with 75 FPS on average at 1080p using the high quality preset. Here we also see that the 1660 Super is 14% faster, and given that it costs 15% more, it looks like AMD is just slotted into Nvidia's current pricing scheme rather than compete with it. Here's a quick look at total system power consumption in Gears 5 and F1 2019. As you can see, the 5500 XT is a big improvement on the 580 and 590, reducing total system consumption by around 30%. The 1660 Super still used slightly less power, but at this point I feel it's a bit of a non-issue. Overall power consumption is good, not amazing for a 7nm GPU, but it's comparable to where Nvidia are at right now. Well, I've got to say, given the price, the 8GB 5500 XT didn't look too hot in any of those benchmarks. But before we jump into the cost per frame analysis, let's just look at the average performance across the dozen games tested at 1080p
The enemy's bottom barracks have fallen.
40p. No surprises here. On average, the 5500 XT was indeed slower than the RX 590 and only 3.5% faster than the RX 580. Moreover, it was just 5% faster than the GTX 1650 Super and 13% slower than the GTX 1660 Super. The results at the 1440p resolution are much the same. It's again a whisker faster than the 580 and slightly slower than the 590. So let's move on to check out the cost per frame data. Okay, well, as expected, this doesn't look particularly great. Basically, the Radeon RX 5500 XT 8GB comes in offering the same level of value as the GTX 1660 Super at $2.27 per frame based on our 12 game sample. That means you'll be paying a 4% premium per frame over the RX 590 at the current prices. Worse still, the 5500 XT comes in at almost 20% more per frame than the GTX 1650 Super, and we are really talking about a similar level of performance here. Granted, the 8GB 5500 XT does pack twice as much VRAM, but still not a good result for AMD and those seeking a budget graphics card. It's also worth noting that the 8GB 5500 XT costs around 14% more per frame when compared to existing 8GB RX 580s. So not exactly progress, that is it. But what about the cheaper 4GB version that I'm yet to test due to time constraints? Well, AMD says with medium to high quality settings at 1080p, the 4GB model is around 5% slower on average, so that would place it on par with the GTX 1650 Super in terms of performance. But let's just say the performance goes unchanged. So we'll stick with 88 FPS on average, an absolute best case scenario for sure. What this means is AMD can't beat the GTX 1650 Super when asking $170 US for the 4GB version of the 5500 XT. We just can't win that battle. Moreover, for the same money, I think I'd rather just own an RX 580 and get twice as much VRAM. Again, how is this progress, AMD? I'll just note again that I will be testing the 4GB model over the next few days, so expect a detailed 4GB versus 8GB analysis soon, but I can't see us ending up with a good result for AMD here. Well, I've got to say that was massively disappointing, and the performance isn't the real issue here. The 5500 XT was never going to blow your socks off. The issue is the price. AMD has just made no attempt to undercut Nvidia. They've just slotted the 5500 XT into Nvidia's existing pricing structure, so essentially they've rocked up to the party late and offered us nothing new. It's a little crazy to think they were selling us a 232mm squared die for $200 or less. They've been doing so for a little over a year now, and then we finally get an update that's considerably smaller at 158mm squared, so 32% smaller, and it offers the same level of performance and not much. No doubt 7nm supply is playing a big role in that price, but I doubt many of you watching this review care about that. It's more of an AMD problem. But whatever the case, it looks like AMD may have shot themselves in the foot here by aggressively competing with 3-year-old Polaris GPUs. Though ultimately they did have to do this in order to remain competitive in one of the few GPU price segments they're actually competing in. And this all started with the RX 480.
Sacrifice.
我是张美阳，这里是回心真事务所。今天我们要研究的产品是 Redmi 在本月推出的一款搭载120赫兹屏幕刷新率的新手机 Redmi K30。这个120赫兹刷新率的屏幕会带来哪些不同的体验？你真的需要这么高刷新率的屏幕吗？人眼其实很容易被欺骗，比如今天电影的帧率都为24 FPS， 即1秒播放24个画面，其中的每个画面都记录了这24分之1秒钟物体运动的全部光线信息，有非常明显的运动模糊。 这么做的好处在于可以让人眼觉得画面连贯，但代价就是损失了这1/24秒钟的运动细节。这种牺牲对于电影或许值得，但在游戏中，几乎每一帧画面都是实时渲染出来的静态图像。如果也按每秒24帧呈现，你就会感觉到明显的动作割裂。正因为此，现在这些大型游戏的帧率甚至能达到300 FPS。PC 显示器厂商也先后推出了一系列超高刷新率的电竞显示屏，让你看清画面变化的每个瞬间。而在手机行业，屏幕刷新率都在60赫兹。Redmi K30是今天量产手机中为数不多达到120赫兹的。它是怎么做到的？我们在往期节目中解释过。LCD 液晶显示屏可以通过独立控制每个液晶单元格的电流，改变红、绿、蓝、紫像素的亮度，产生对应的颜色。而120赫兹刷新率意味着每一帧的显示时间只有约8.3毫秒，是普通手机屏幕的一半。为此 ，Redmi K30屏幕的驱动芯片通过升级电路设计，让芯片面积相比60赫兹屏幕的增大了15%，驱动能力则提升了27%。此外，液晶单元格在变换颜色时，需要从基准电压升到数据电压，这个过程耗费的时间与电路负载成正比。负载指的是电路中电容、电阻这些电子元件，通过减小这些元件，就能降低负载，缩短液晶单元格的充电爬升时间，实现更快的刷新。不仅如此 ，Redmi K30为了追求轻薄，屏幕还采用了 Incel 全贴合技术，将 ITO 触控薄膜置于显示面板的 TFT 玻璃之上，让显示屏和触控屏合二为一。那么这块120赫兹刷新率的屏幕跟60赫兹的比起来会有多大差距？我们可以观察滑动操作在慢镜头下的表现，把画面速度放慢到0.5倍，60赫兹的屏幕已经出现了明显的卡顿、拖影，而120赫兹的屏幕看起来依然顺畅。不过，这种对比并不能说明问题，因为人眼毕竟没有慢放功能，在实际使用时，你是否能察觉120赫兹的细腻表现？有观点甚至认为60赫兹以上的屏幕刷新率，人眼就已无法分辨，这是真的吗？要想回答这些问题，我们就要探究人眼的刷新率有多少。人眼能感光，关键在于视网膜、视感细胞中的视子质。当视子质遇到光线时，能快速捕获光子，在短短几万亿分之秒内完成一系列光化学反应，产生生物电信号，再经视觉神经传导到大脑皮层。尽管视觉中枢还需时间来处理这些电信号，但反应速度依然惊人。美国空军做过一项实验，让飞行员看着屏幕，并快速闪过飞机的图片。有些飞行员甚至能分辨出飞机的型号，哪怕这个飞机图片只出现了220分之1秒。也就是说，人眼的刷新率其实远在120赫兹之上。随着 5G 技术的普及，以及手机上影视、游戏和各种日常应用的帧率升级，人眼长期被低帧率、运动模糊限制的生产力，完全可以在120赫兹刷新率的屏幕上得到解放。而配备了双模 5G 功能的 Redmi K30，也足以让这块屏幕物尽其用。除了看视频、玩游戏，在更加日常的这些操作中，比如切换界面、打开应用、看新闻时，你同样能感受到120赫兹屏幕刷新率带来的细腻体验。这就跟视网膜屏幕一样，让你用了就再也回不去。且在 Redmi K30出色的性能优化下，功耗也不成问题。经过长达7小时的视频、游戏、购物、看新闻续航测试，这块120赫兹刷新率的屏幕，相比60赫兹的普通屏幕，功耗仅增加了5个百分点。现在我们再来回答视频开头的疑惑：你真的需要120赫兹的屏幕刷新率吗？这就像你真的需要这么全的全面屏吗？你真的需要这么多的后置摄像头吗？你真的需要这么高的相机像素吗？其实根本不是你需要担心的问题，因为技术的突破从来不是按需分配，而人眼感官的生理极限也比你的想象力要高得多。我是张美阳，这里是回形针事务所。每期节目我们都研究一个来自客户的具体需求。如果你有想要我们研究的产品，欢迎发送邮件到 paperclip@foxmail.com， 去我们的微博找到这条视频。我们将下周抽2位观众，分别送出 Redmi K30一台。我们下期节目见。
As next.
Kunkka's is going to try to clear out the wave. They really want to take down this life stealer, and I don't know if they can do it.
Well, the $200 price point for graphics cards is definitely heating up. And with that, I expect the comment section to probably also heat up with this video. So I'm going to go ahead and put on some eye protection.
This one's for all the mob
Get the amazing sound of planar magnetic headphones with the X Hi-Fiman HE4XXs from Drop. The highly efficient magnetic planar design and adjustable fit make them the perfect pair for anyone seeking legendary audio without the legendary price tag. To learn more and to take advantage of the current sale of the Hi-Fiman 4XXs, head to the drop in the link below. Alright, so obviously AMD has just launched its 5500 XT 4GB and 8GB cards. The only difference between those two cards is the amount of VRAM on there, which is very much so how they used to do it with the Polaris series, with the 480, 470, 580, 570. They'd have a 4GB and 8GB variant, where other than that, the core is the same. So what we did here is we also used a couple of different NVIDIA cards here because we like to show how the competition stacks up versus the price points. So what we did was we took a 1650, and a 1650 Super, and a 1660, although this is an expensive 1660, we'll caveat that one in a second, we'll talk about why, to sort of see how the performance is right around that $200 entry point when it comes to the very competitive $200 entry point for graphics cards, because that is, according to the Steam statistics, where most people tend to spend their money in terms of graphics cards, 50 and 60 series cards, at 1080p. 1080p is still the overwhelming dominant resolution. So looking at these cards at this price point at 1080p makes perfect sense. Now let's go and talk about what is new with AMD first of all. This is on their 7nm architecture. So it is PCIe 4.0, although this card is nowhere near fast enough to come anywhere close to saturating even PCIe Gen 3. 4.0 is just, quite honestly, a marketing thing. That's because AMD has 4.0 on the Ryzen 3 stuff, you gotta put it on there. But with this card, it's not anywhere close to 4.0, but that's a little bit of a rant. It's also launched with new software, the Adrenalin 2020 series. So the driver for Radeon is a bit different than NVIDIA. Where NVIDIA has GeForce Experience, that is a standalone piece of software that complements your graphics card, it's not required. You don't have to download it. In fact, it's an option that you can uncheck when you download the driver. The driver otherwise is still a very basic GUI that you can right-click on the desktop, click on NVIDIA settings, and get a very slow and outdated menu to control some 3D settings for your graphics card. But with Radeon, it is baked into the driver. Now, I have been a hater of the Radeon software. Global Wattman, its bugginess, its overhead that it uses in terms of processing power. You can actually get lower scores across the board with it open versus it closed, which you have to have it open to get accurate, truly accurate readings of things like junction temperature and edge temp and the core speed and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, open me up to see how things are running to cause me to run slower. And I've always hated the Radeon software. But it's been completely redesigned from the ground up with Adrenalin 2020. Includes things like built-in streaming software, which we're going to do a review on because it's going to then do all of your screen capturing at a driver level, which sounds like it could be very low overhead. So we want to test that sort of stuff, especially if you're trying to do live streaming or something like a 5500 XT. It's got a much more user-intuitive Global Wattman when it comes to tuning. I think they even just call it tuning now. I tested it a little bit with these cards, but for the test we saw today, all the cards were running out of the box settings, no manual overclocks, no additional boost clock, it's just how it performed out of the box. The software is something I want to do a full standalone review of, at least when it comes to things like AMD Boost or Radeon Boost, letting the software kind of dynamically adjust the resolution based on need. So that's something we'll be taking a look at in the future, not necessarily in this review. This is a raw horsepower review when it comes to these graphics cards. The cards we chose from NVIDIA, this kind of segues me back into the argument that I've sort of had recently with the whole, like, NVIDIA, your product stack is way too freaking crowded. We were even having a hard time trying to determine where to draw the line in the sand to cut off which graphics cards we're going to test when it comes to tiers, because every like $30 when it comes to NVIDIA has a whole different tier of graphics card that you can shop from. You've got 1650, 1650 Super, 1660, 1660 Super, 1660 Ti, all of those are within like $30. And if you take into account the custom board variants from the AIBs, each one of those have like 3 or 4 different SKUs within that same tier, which can make it bump right up into the price or exceed the price of the next tier. Enter the GTX 1660 Gaming X that costs more money than the Super and is slower.
Dire structures are fortified.
We use this card though to represent the 1660 because one, it's the only one I have here right now. And then two, we went back and checked all of our spreadsheets of all of our testing and stuff, and it was absolutely no faster than the MSI or the EVGA 1660 Black, which is an MSRP card, it was exactly the same. So there was zero benefit to that card over an MSRP. So this one comes in at $249. It performs the same as the card that was like $209. So just wanted to go ahead and point that out there. But the MSRP for the 1660 Super is $229. But if we look right now at Amazon, because this is actually prior to the launch of this, Amazon has already leaked the pre-order, whatever, for the 1550, the 5500 XT. The XFX RX 5500 XT Thick 2 Pro 8 gig is $229, which puts you right at the MSRP for the 1660 Super. We didn't even include the Super on this test, even though the pricing is the same, because we wanted to see how the 1660, which is the next generation or next tier up from the 1650 series that we're testing against, how this performs. So if this outperforms these cards, well, the 5500 XT cards, the Super definitely will. But it's just one of those things where it kind of shows that as much as I hate NVIDIA's product stack, it probably makes sense. Anyway, let's go and take a look at it.
Look, the enemy's attacking your middle tower. Don't let him do that! Radiant structures are fortified. They're trying to knock down your middle tower.
Makes needs.
Your bottom tower, it's kind of bad. Rally the troops and get over there! Your bottom tower is under attack. The enemy's top tower has fallen.
This needs.
Guys, put up a
So if we learned anything from these benchmarks, it's that the 4 gig and the 8 gig really there's no performance difference between these two cards, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing. We'll talk about that in a second. Wait, there we go. There we go. All of our titles are at 1080p max settings, and we usually put the settings at the top of the chart if you're kind of wondering how far to push these cards. I always do max settings because I like to show you what the worst case performance scenario is going to be, so that you know it'll only go up from there. But with the exception of Red Dead Redemption 2, which is a much newer, much more demanding title, and probably, I don't know if it's less optimized or what, it is a console port, so there is that. But what I did was I took the 1650 Super, I placed it on the test bench, dialed in the presets, not any of the custom stuff that you can control in there, but just the preset slider to where I got about 60 FPS with the 1650 Super, and then locked it down there and tested the rest of the cards with the same settings. That setting happens to be the very first tick of balance. So it's kind of weird the way Red Dead works. It's not like a 1 through 10, it's not like a low, medium, high, very high, ultra. It's favor performance, favor performance, favor performance, balance, balance, favor quality, favor quality, favor quality. It's really weird. So there's like 4 ticks of balance in the middle. It's the very first tick, if you're wondering what it is. And then obviously 1080p, no VC. And then what I found was a little bit anomalous to where even the 1660, which is obviously faster than the rest of these cards on the table, was getting the same FPS as even like the 4 gigabyte card and the 1650 Super and all that sort of stuff. So I think that could be just title optimization. I'm not entirely sure. But with that said, you might be asking yourself why the cards we chose were on the chart. Well, it has everything to do with pricing. For $169.99 is what the 4 gig 5500 XT is MSRP at. $199.99 US is what the 8 gig is priced at. So $30 delta cards. Well, if you take that into account, it kind of makes the 8 gig card a lot less of a value, because at least the test that we were running, it was absolutely no difference. $30 towards a spec that we are not utilizing, which makes that obviously the compelling buy versus the other 1600 series cards. But if you're looking at the 8 gigabyte card, it's a weird pricing structure, because AMD chose to price these cards right up against the 1660 Super pricing. Well, 1660 for sure, but 1660 Super you can have as low as $229. Now, but Jay, this is $199. That's $30 more. That doesn't make sense. Well, I don't know what these cards are going to cost anymore. You guys know the games that manufacturers play with MSRP, right? Usually the AIB cards cost more. That's because they put more R&D into it, with custom PCBs, custom coolers, dual fans, backplates, all that sort of stuff. So it's one of those things where I don't know what this card is going to cost. I don't know if the Sapphire Pulse that I'm holding right here is going to cost MSRP. So once this video goes live and then everything hits the retailers, we'll have to see what the pricing ends up being. But if the 5500 XT 8GB ends up being anywhere near $215, $220, let's face it, they're never 15, they're never 5. It's always 209, 219, 29. They love the 9s, right? It's a way to get an extra $10. I digress. Then it becomes a lot less of a value because you can get better raw performance at the 1660 series, 1660 non-super even, or even a 1650 Super, because it's now definitely in the price point of a 1650 Super, and then depending on the titles will depend on where you get more FPS. Now it definitely trades blows with the 1650 Super, no problems there. 1650 handedly beats it, even the 4 gig. The 4 gig versus the 1650 non-super is a no-brainer, get the 5500. But as soon as you start taking into account custom PCBs going up against the crowded product stack of NVIDIA, then it gets to the point where it becomes a lot harder of a decision to make. Not so much whether or not you get the 5500 XT versus the 1660 and the Supers. It's more so which 1660 or 1660 Super do you buy. It's never been this crowded. We've never had this many cards down at the $200-ish price point. As long as I've been doing YouTube, we've had a 50 series, a 60 series, a 70, and an 80. And that was it. And then the TI for the 80. But now we've got so many freaking cards down here. If I'm confused, what the hell are you feeling? I'm telling you right now, it's just one of those things where there's no way I could do this review and have it be 100% useful to everyone, because if you just up your budget by $10, it make the difference of 10 FPS, depending on the title and depending on which card you go with. But if I were a businessman, then I would say that that was clearly the right strategic move to make in terms of pricing, because if you start having all these options and the price points, then I guess in terms of accuracy by volume, more people are going to buy your stuff. I'm gonna have my ear to the ground and definitely see what the pricing is, because like I already said, the XFX Boy was leaked on Amazon early at $230, which means you could buy a 1660 Super, like I said, for $10 less than that and get a better experience than anything you get from 5500. Which is kind of sad, because we need AMD to do what they did with the 5700, which is lean on NVIDIA enough to have them change their strategy a little bit, like they did with bringing the 2070 back. Because remember, the 5700 XT was bumping up against the 2070 Super at a much less price. So sound off in the comments below. I'm sure by now you guys have seen several reviews on this card. I have not spoken to any of my colleagues. I have no idea what anyone else's opinions are of these cards. I like to kind of quarantine myself, not because I'm gassy, but because I like to kind of be uninfluenced by other people's testing and kind of come up with my own and then sort of compare notes after the fact. So you guys sound off in the comments below how you feel AMD did with this particular launch. Did they nail it with the pricing? Did they win you over, or are you going to jump over to something from the 1600 series simply because of performance to dollars? That's it. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.
He excites me.
AMD is starting to round out its RX 5000 series of GPUs, having started at the middle and planning to work its way outward. The newest addition to AMD's family of GPUs is the RX 5500 XT, following the previously announced OEM model RX 5500 non-XT, and DIY available 5700 XT and 5700 cards. 5500 XT has 4GB and 8GB options available with MSRP at $160 and $200 respectively, putting it in most direct competition with the 1650 Super at $160. We'll test 3 models of 5500 XT today, including thermal, BIOS programming, gaming performance, VRAM differences in capacity, and noise. before that, this video is brought to you by the Thermaltake Core P3. The Core P3 is one of the most versatile cases on the market. It includes wall mounting hardware if a showcase is what you're after, but it can also run as a standing or horizontal test bench, making it highly accessible for modifying and overclocking hardware. The case includes tempered glass and an open-air layout for easy management and high visibility, offering a truly unique chassis for enthusiasts. Learn more at the link in the description below. So, first of all, let me apologize. I'm extremely sick right now. It happened right at the beginning of this review cycle. I'm going to apologize if I'm a bit nasally in this review. I'm going to do my best. We have a lot of data to go through, though. The 5500 XT card still runs on the same Navi architecture. It still uses 7nm manufacturing process, but it cuts down some other features. The die size, obviously, is one of the areas where cost savings come out because it's 158mm squared versus the original 5700 XT die of 251mm squared. And that reduces manufacturing costs significantly. It improves the yield, which also reduces manufacturing costs significantly because you're throwing away fewer dies for less silicon for the product. And ultimately, the result is increased yield for a smaller die. Other than that, notable differences include a reduction to 22 compute units, each containing the usual 64 stream processors. You multiply it out, times stream processor times 64 gives you full stream processor count. The 5700 XT for comparison has 40 complete units, and AMD is still sticking with its painfully bad naming convention here for the clocks as Game Clock and Boost Clock, with Game Clock presumably going with Game Cache, which is honestly probably one of the worst decisions AMD has ever made for anything related to product marketing, because that was the Ryzen 3000 launch, which didn't need marketing help. They didn't need to do the, we're trying to relate to gamers by renaming something that's been in existence for decades as something else with the word game in it. Anyway, well, Cache has been decades anyway. L3 is a bit more recent, but L3 was renamed Game Cache, but the Game Clock thing, let's just redefine back to what people are used to. This is not news. This has been around since Navi came out. But when AMD says Game Clock, what they mean is the traditional interpretation of Boost Clock. And when they say Boost Clock, what they mean is peak opportunistic boost, which can happen for as little as 1 millisecond. So basically, the Boost Clock, we can ignore both these numbers because we're working with partner models today that have potentially done some tuning in VBIOS. We'll talk about all of that as we go through the review. And a couple of other things to talk about before we really get into stuff. The cards, it's rated for 130 watt for board power budget, and the cards can of course tweak their power budget afforded to the GPU by VBIOS, and that's done based on the board partner and if they have a good enough VRM to accompany it. So we'll talk about the power budget of the Power Color Red Dragon we're reviewing and of the Sapphire Pulse we're reviewing. Then we also have the 4GB models of the Pulse to look at as well. And finally, a note on overclocking. We're going to show some results in the charts for the 4GB Sapphire Pulse that are bad. And the reason we've included those is because they are overclock results. But with overclocking specifically on AMD, in general you should do this, but specifically on AMD, you really need to validate the results as you increase the clock, because what will happen is it'll look like you have a much higher stable clock than you actually do, because the bigger numbers will apply and they'll potentially hold. It might not crash, you might not get the black screens and catastrophic failures you get with NVIDIA, but actually you kind of would prefer to have those failures because it helps you get stuff not working. Whereas when you are, typically what will happen is you push, and you end up with an unstable setting. Now with 5500 model, we spent about half a day, about 6 hours on it, overclocking it, and we're never able to get it to improve beyond stock by any measure that was worth mentioning at all. But typically 1 or 2 FPS max delta, not even positive, just different from the stock results. And then we included some of the results where it's bad when overclocked, specifically to illustrate why you need to validate your results, not just on the internet what you said.
Killing spree.
Because it might not actually work. Anyway, that's just a note for you. Let's get into the testing data. We've got a lot of games, thermals, and more, and then we'll talk conclusions. Before we do any comparisons between the 8GB and 4GB models later, We need to make sure they're running at roughly the same frequency, as any differences here would potentially invalidate testing that attempts to isolate memory capacity. During standardized frequency testing and the reproduced frame of Firestrike Extreme, we measured the 8GB Sapphire RX 5500 XT pulse at about 1835 to 1840 MHz average, with peaks at about 1850 MHz. The 4GB model averaged slightly higher, around 1840 to 1845 MHz, and peaks at about 6 MHz. Given that our difference between the two is typically about 5 to 7 MHz point to point, we're close enough that these are basically identical. We're more on the lookout for numbers close to 15 to 25 MHz or greater. A 5 to 7 MHz gap will fully more differences, and so these two can be fairly compared attempts to isolate the memory differences without needing to do any tweaking to the core file. It's good, because AMD's drivers are still terrible for any kind of frequency change. We've actually zoomed the scale to 1899 MHz so that the difference is easier to see and extremely exaggerated. So keep in mind that we have blown out the scale intentionally, although we typically like to start at 0. Get into some thermal tests. We have a lot of these, but we'll start with the comparative between Power Color and Sapphire for their 8GB models, just because this is typically what differentiates one card from the next. It's not actual gaming performance. These are all going to be about the same for frame rate, and you'll see that today. But it's more about the quality of life differences and the noise at a given temperature. For the Red Dragon versus the Sapphire 500 XT Pulse, the Pulse set to its 130 watt default V-BIOS, followed by its V-BIOS, and the Red Dragon set to its only 130 watt V-BIOS, so it's normalized for power, which is important as well. The two cards plot as follows. The Common Color Red Dragon at 40 dBA plots a GPU edge temperature of about 57 degrees Celsius, with the Pulse at 40 dBA edge temperature at about 59 degrees for the target at 40 dBA. This has more to do with how the V-BIOS is set there fan thermal response more than anything else, but because we've eliminated the fan part of that, we're able to better see how the thermal response is running stock. All you're really looking at is what numbers they set for the target. Junction temperature matters much more though, and we see the pulse at about 76 degrees Celsius versus the 80 degrees Celsius. This is outside of error or variance, but also is not a tremendous difference. Thus far, the pulse is faring better at the same noise levels. As far as GDDR6 thermals, we'll just throw that on the screen really quickly. They're basically the same between the two cards. There's no difference. This doesn't affect the decision making at all. This chart shows the fan thermal response under full stop conditions. Both the Pulse and the Red Dragon run extremely low fan speeds, averaging about 32 to 34 dBA at our standard 20-inch distance when under stock settings, which is really quiet and low speed. This is the advantage of two comparatively good coolers when matched with a relatively low power consumption GPU. The Pulse and the Red Dragon were good with the 5700 XPs, 5700 non-XPs, and they're both good with the 5500 XPs as well. And that scales even better when the enemy's middle tower has fallen. The previous model. So the Pulse spins up to about 1100 RPM to maintain a 70-degree edge temperature, with the Red Dragon spinning up to 100 RPM to maintain about a 63 to 65-degree edge temperature. Both are below 34 dBA. The GPU core power budget reconfigures the BIOS. The Sapphire Pulse silent BIOS starts at 120 watts shown on this chart, allowing the reduction of better control for noise by reducing that extra thermal power. Meanwhile, the BIOS does about 130 to 105 watts, and the Power Color Red Dragon V-BIOS does about 130 watts fixed. We're getting into games now. We'll start with our usual Sniper Elite 4, which we like because it's so consistent and predictable. It's allowed us to build up a mountain of data for this particular game because it doesn't really change much. We'll move to more modern games after this and then add a couple of DX11 games at the end. For Sniper Elite 4 at 1080p, the RX 5500 XT 8GB GPUs, both the Power Color and Sapphire versions of these cards, end up at about 101 to 102 FPS average. The 4GB Pulse lands at 102 to 103 FPS average, which is well within test variance and equivalent to 8GB models. You cannot state there's a difference. It's all within error. Frame time consistency, as illustrated by 1% and 0.1% lows, though we'll have frame time plots for this and other games later, are also equal between the two cards. there is no difference. You should just buy the 4GB model and not waste money on the 8GB model in this scenario. The 1650 Super, meanwhile, is outperformed marginally by the 5500 XT when both are stock at 100 FPS average versus 101 to 102 FPS average. This difference is definitely not noticeable, and frame time pacing is also equivalent between them. Overclocking the 1650 Super got up to 105 FPS average, and overclocking the 5500 XT card got up to 107 to 108 FPS average. In this case, the overclock held a bit better than the other 5500 XT 4GB. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is next on the list, using DirectX 12 and tested at both 1080p and 1440p. At 1080p, the RX 5500 XT 8GB Pulse ran at about 70 FPS average, with lows at 61 FPS 1% and 59 FPS 0.1%. Compared to the 5500 XT's 4GB 63 FPS average, we actually did see meaningful uplift in this title, about 11%. Overclocking the 5500 XT 4GB was just a frustrating waste of time in general, but in this title we see part of the reason why. In the best case scenario, it did nothing, while the more typical worst case scenario was performance degradation because of instability. As for whether the 8GB model would be worth it over the 4GB model, the average FPS uplift is less important at this pricing delta than the frame time delta. We see frame time consistency plummet with the 4GB 5500 XT. That said, despite a meaningful uplift at a $200 price target for 8GB versus the 1650 Super 4GB 160 availability for equivalent performance, we'd have to give overall victory to the 1650 Super in this benchmark. Note further that we, as you'll see later, did not really see this 4 versus 8GB disparity in almost any other title. It's mostly exclusive to Tomb Raider, and otherwise the difference is more clock bound on the core, or core resource bound, not memory capacity bound. NVIDIA's memory compression may be giving it an edge here. The 5500 XT doesn't offer meaningful frame time performance uplift either, and is nearing the wider error margins for frame time measurements at these naturally lower sample count metrics when compared to the 1650 Super. Overclocking the 1650 Super puts it at 75 FPS average, while overclocking the 5500 XT 8GB is at 74 FPS average. The two are the same. We need more data from other games to support conclusions here at the best. We'll look at some frame time data first. And just before that, Power Color 500 XT 8GB Red Dragon also did about 70 FPS average stock, performing equivalently in all ways to the 5500 XT 8GB Pulse. For this frame time plot, we'll be comparing the 5500 XT 4GB, 8GB, and 1650 Super models to each other at 1080p. This is the best run of 4 from each device. The RX 5500 XT 8GB is fairly consistent from start to finish, with frame times ranging from clusters around 12 to 14 milliseconds at the start of the test, to 15 milliseconds in the middle, and approaching 16 milliseconds at the end. Remember, lower frame times are better, and more consistent frame times are best. The plot shows performance frame to frame, and is the best illustration possible of the base metric of performance, which is time, rather than the abstraction that FPS is. The 5500 XT 4GB model encounters a couple of large frame time spikes, visible to the user as stutters or hitches. The worst is an excursion to about 34 milliseconds for a single frame, versus the previous frame's time of about 18 milliseconds. This happens again, to a lesser degree later, and seems to be mostly exclusive to our Shadow of the Tomb Raider tests, whereas the 4GB and 8GB models showed no meaningful difference elsewhere. We'd assume NVIDIA's memory compression and comparatively reduced architectural dependency on bandwidth leads to this delta, but we were able to reproduce the results on the 4GB model. The 1650 Super, meanwhile, mostly matches the 5500 XT 8GB card and can be seen as functionally the same in performance. There is no perceptible difference between these two in this benchmark. At 1440p, the 5500 XT 8GB Pulse lands at 47 FPS average, not bad considering this isn't really the target resolution for the card, and the 5500 XT 4GB model does about 44 FPS. The 5500 XT 4GB OC hinders performance as a result of poor stability and, frankly, poor overclocking software, and so we'd advise against wasting your time in most instances. The 1650 Super stock GPU runs 46.5 FPS average.
Well, the $200 price point for graphics cards
seeks to end the Great Schism. Hounding.
Prepare for battle.
Yes. Primordial will.
Let's just skip 30 seconds and get started.
This one is in the bag.
Rain of sparks. The self is not ready. The self is not ready. Not yet. The self roams.
Okay, make with the killing.
Toward synthesis.
Oh, someone's gone. Quick, Jake, go find him.
Your conflict must be ended. Onward.
Someone had to die first.
Well, if it ain't first bloody blood. Ever forward. Yes. Coursing. The self moves. Pities and fragment. Halt. Primordial strength. Be always aware. Ever closer. Suffer hard. Hold here. Onward.
Go, Dit, go. Go, Phantom Cancer, go. Die.
Yes.
Let's kill answer.
The self knows this ahead. Not yet.
Let's kill answer.
Disunion. I am voltage. So must be. I know I'll picture it. What was none becomes one again. Doggedly. All must proceed. The second soul. In you fragment of self. Submit. Watchful. Kill. Electric arc. Must move. Phasing. The self seeks. Ahead. The self moves.
Defend your top tower.
What's the green room do again? Toward synthesis. Sympathy. It will be. Yes.
And here's a fortification from Radiant.
In unison. Ever closer.
You know that all-important little tower of yours? Yeah, it's over here.
Action.
Defend your middle tower.
Indeed. So it must be.
Your top tower is under attack. Enemy's bottom tower is down. Call me when it's else.
The self rose. Spark of red.
Radiant down.
Fades in. All must proceed. Controlling.
Your top tower is under attack. Your top tower is fallen.
Coin for me. Unity is nigh. Seeking.
Your middle tower is under attack.
Balance the scale.
Your middle tower has fallen.
Stand
When
firm.
are they gonna learn, Jax?
Unity must be
You
achieved.
destroyed the enemy's top tower. But don't get too carried away. The radiant structures are fortified.
You will cease. A timely reward. Yes. Returned from ancient darkness. Onward. Stricken. Yes. Oh, pardon my quill. Onward. Let no foe come near. Guard this ground. The warden strikes. Yes. Stand firm.
Killing spree.
Concede.
Your bottom tower is under attack. You think Dire's fortification will work, Jax?
It will be. So it must be. Hand of Midas. The self seeks. Self becomes selves. Be watchful. It is stand firm. The self is not ready.
This is mayhem.
Not yet. Onward. Unity must be achieved. The arc grows brighter.
Hey, take a look at your bottom tower.
You shall be
Your
scoured.
bottom tower is under attack.
justice.
Defend your bottom tower. You're right, Jax. I really should do
protect
something
your
about
base
that.
more safely than you have before.
Quantum flickering.
That makes two. That makes two.
Be still. Splintered once more.
Quite dangerous, this one. Ownage.
Hounding. Tempest of self expands. In unison. Safeguard this world. Not time yet. Always aware indeed. Seeking. The self moves. Coin for me. Onward. Hold here. Ahead. The self.
Double kill.
And coursing. The self splinters. Not flux. All must proceed. A charge reconciliation. Ever closer. Attack. Forward.
Your middle tower is under attack.
Coursing. Division of labor. Stand firm. Power cognizant. Don't mind if I do. Ahead. Yes. Action.
This is me.
Yes. All must proceed. Disunity on stand firm. Cease.
The enemy's middle tower was full.
The self seeks.
作为一个超宽屏爱好者啊，我用过非常多超宽屏。如果你要问我目前最喜欢的超宽屏，那么肯定就是我现在正在使用的30+G9，它是一款拥有19英寸、120赫兹刷新率、51200×1440分辨率的显示器，综合屏幕面积、屏幕刷新率、屏幕分辨率这3个参数，在超宽屏这个品类中应该是当之无愧的王者。但是我们都知道，消费电子产品的升级速度是非常快的。CRG90这个宝座做了半年之后，今天也终于迎来了它的第一位挑战者——爱公 AG493UCX。它不仅配备了一块和 CRG90相似的屏幕，在某些方面它甚至比 CRG90还要优秀一些。具体优秀在哪呢？我们一起来看看。刚刚也说了，这是一块49英寸32:9 51200×1440分辨率的屏幕，51200×2后刚好是2560，所以这块屏幕可以呈现了1.5。无线拼接，屏幕面积是27英寸多的2分，DPI 也达到了108，再加上超宽屏的屏幕，上加成。首先做完游戏，得益于最近几年超宽屏的普及，目前32:9的标准被许多游戏开发商广泛使用。最近几年的3A 大作对这个比例都有适配，并且这种适配大部分都是在原来16:9的基础上进行横向增加的，而非裁剪。这就直接导致你用这块屏幕玩游戏的时候速度翻倍。我个人非常喜欢用这块屏幕玩一些赛车或者 RPG 游戏，更宽广的是可以有效提升我的沉浸感，带给你一种身临其境的感觉。说到这，也有人会说，这种屏幕并不适合玩竞技游戏。也对啊，像《守望先锋》《地球生》这类游戏，确实不太适合用32:9的超宽屏，因为那会极大的增加你的游戏负担。所以我个人也建议，如果用这个游戏玩《守望先锋》，可以将分辨率调整至2560×1440，从而让你的精力更加聚焦。不过玩《绝地求生》，我个人会比较推荐21:9，也就是3440×1440，因为这个比例之下，在卡视野的时候会有非常大的优势。既然提到了游戏，就顺便聊一下 G-Menu， 它是爱公最新研发的电竞显示器配套软件，可以让你直接在电脑上控制显示器的画面参数、游戏模式、氛围灯以及分屏模式等等，功能非常强大，并且主打的游戏模式还能根据你使用的游戏激活你预设的参数。什么意思呢？举个例子。玩吃鸡的时候，如果用户 A 喜欢用第一人称射击模式，那么他在游戏同步中设置好之后，以后每次启动吃鸡，显示器就会自动调用第一人称射击模式，从而免去了每次启动、每次设置的麻烦。当然，如果你不喜欢预设的参数，也可以自行进行修改，自由度非常高。除了娱乐之外，32:9的超宽屏在工作场景之下也有一些用武之地。我个人就非常喜欢用这块屏幕进行视频后期。超大、超宽的屏幕不仅可以让我在 PR 里开启更多的工具窗口，每个窗口还能有着不错的使用面积，使得我的剪辑工作更加轻松，更加游刃有余。了解视频后期的同学应该知道啊，不管是剪辑软件时间线上的素材，还是录音软件上的波形图，它们都是条形的。屏幕越长，你能看到的素材就越多，操作起来就越方便，从而一定程度上减少了你频繁缩放窗口的麻烦。另外，这个显示器还集成了 KVM 切换器，这个功能可以说是 CRG90的一大遗憾啊。拥有这个功能后，意味着显示器背面的 USB hub 可以跟随信号源，从而实现一套键鼠控制2台电脑。举个简单的例子，我的工作电脑一台是 Mac Mini， 一台是 Windows PC， 我把 Mini 通过 Type-C 进行连接，一台 Windows PC 通过 DP 以及 USB 上行线进行连接。接着，我把无线键鼠的接收器插在显示器背面的 USB hub 上，这个时候显示器显示哪台电脑的画面，键鼠就可以控制哪台电脑，非常方便。之前我用 CRG90的时候，因为没有这个功能，导致我每次切换输入源后，还要切换蓝牙键鼠的连接设备，非常麻烦。接口方面 ，DP493非常丰富，比我现在用的 CRG90还要多。它采用了2个 DP1.4、2个 HDMI 2.0。以及一个多功能Type-C，这意味着你可以连接的设备可以达到5个。我个人的桌面设备就比较多，一台 Mac Mini，一台 尊者，一个安卓盒子，一个 PS4 Pro 以及一个 Switch， 这所有设备我都可以直接连接这台显示器，极大的提升了显示器的利用率。另外，这个显示器还配备了 USB Hub， 通过 Type-C 或者 USB 上行线，或者是也可以额外获得3个 USB 3.2接口，并且其中一个 USB 接口还支持快速充电。Type-C 接口也非常强大，不仅支持音视频输入 USB， 还支持65瓦的供电输出。这意味着你通过一条双视线连接 MacBook 或者 LG Gram 这类笔记本电脑后，可以实现音视频输入 USB Hub 以及充电，一条线干掉3条线，非常实用。接着聊聊这款显示器的电源。AG493配备了一块49英寸的128刷新率为120赫兹，比例为1820，是目前参数最豪华的超宽屏之一，和我目前正在使用的三星 CRG90 平面参数唯一的弱项是亮度。AG493UCX 最高支持 Display HDR 400，而三星 CRG90 最高支持 Display HDR 1000。当然，即便是 Display HDR 400，在效果方面也还是不错的。如果你的电影和游戏刚好支持 HDR 的话，那么它可以给你带来更真实的画面观感。比如《战地1》这个游戏，开启 HDR 后，我就能够明显感觉到左边的太阳更加耀眼，右边的云朵细节更加丰富。颜色方面，经过我们测试发现，这款显示器覆盖了84%的欧多比 RGB。VA 屏的显示效果我就不赘述了。色彩介于厅和 IPS 之间，对比度好，也无需担心漏光的问题。但可视角相较于 IPS 会逊色一些，也会有一些拖影。任何面板都有自己的优劣势。VA 平面板虽然相较于 IPS 有些弱项，但胜在性价比高，这也是为什么同规格的 VA 屏显示器比 IPS 便宜很多的原因。AG493 是一款定位电竞的显示器，所以在外观方面依然续了爱攻电竞显示器非常具有家庭式特色的造型，全金属的浮空式脚架非常霸气。因为显示器非常大也非常重，所以 AG493 的脚架在尺寸上也较为偏高，横向宽度为68.5厘米，纵向宽度为30厘米，非常占据桌面空间。因此，想要购买这款显示器的同学，最好还是先掂量一下自己的桌面尺寸。我的演示桌子宽度是90厘米，长度是185厘米。AG493 放上去之后，可以说恰到好处。脚架采用了全金属的材料，支持上下左右以及仰俯角度的调整，灵活度不错。AG493 的边框并算不上窄，左右和上边框宽度为11毫米，下边宽度为20毫米。考虑到三星 CRG90 也差不多，推测这应该是面板的。这个显示器还配备了2个5瓦立体扬声器，分居显示器左右两侧。由于显示器本身比较长，2个扬声器距离又比较远，所以立体声效果还是比较明显的。音质和音量方面，我个人觉得作为显示器的内置扬声器来说还是不错的，满足要求不高的用户没有问题。OSD 按键位于显示器右下方，包括电源键，一共有5个按键。电源键旁边凸起的部分则是红外接收器。这次 AG493 还配了一个 OSD 遥控器，通过它你可以像遥控电视一样对 OSD 进行控制。我个人比较喜欢用这个遥控器调节显示器音量和更换输入源。软体方面 ，OSD 采用了以红色为主色调的菜单。操作逻辑和其他显示器略微有所不同的地方是，返回键是箭头左键，而不是返回按钮，这点和我们的操作习惯有所不同。虽然这是一款定位电竞的显示器，但 AG493 还是配合 RGB 氛围灯，这对于喜欢 RGB 的用户可能算是一个小小的遗憾。总结，作为爱攻旗下的旗舰超宽屏，AG493 整体表现可圈可点。相较于 CRG90 这位前辈，虽然在亮度方面有所降低，但得益于丰富的接口以及 KVM 的加持，我认为它和 CRG 比算是各有所长。要更高的亮度，还是要更丰富的接口以及 KVM 切换器，相信不同的用户会有不同的选择。好了，以上就是本次视频的所有内容了。喜欢我们节目，希望订阅我们的频道。我们下期节目再见。
Killing spree. That makes 2. is mayhem.
Radiant structures are fortified.
本节目由角尖流口水提供。
今天儿阳光明媚，哎，我现在开车去哪里？我现在去给大家找吃的，嘿嘿。因为重庆每到冬天的时候一定要吃点烤羊子哈，所以今儿我来找家吃烤全羊的地方。来，羊子拿起来了，给我打电话来选羊子。这个是在一片树林里的这种房间。活羊点杀处，本店正做女朋友的，约杜绝冰冻羊上车，放心吃羊肉，来自大草原的雪山羊。哦，这是大草原的雪山羊。嘿嘿嘿，看看看，这就是我们晚上要吃的。小伙伴，你们认不认这个羊到底是不是来自大草原？他现在还不晓得为啥子哈哈儿都要找我们吃掉。今天听说要吃羊子，张姐呀、啥子编导啊，听说中午我们就去喝一碗稀饭吧，把肚子留一留，晚上那几年饿死他油翻他们惨的。我们每年都会吃烤羊，反正我觉得味道都差不多，也就是我们花椒面呐、孜然呐放进去。我印象当中烤羊好吃的话，一定要外面是脆脆的，里面是焦嫩焦嫩的，有点香的。这是我们第一次做节目，我们也好好的来尝一下哈。好，3只羊50几斤一只哈。然后刚才师傅在说哈，就是这个羊的话，因为要杀毛啊、内脏啊、头不要的话，就是现在活吃的一斤其实只烤得出来2两多的肉，所以50几斤也就是10几斤肉这么啊，这个概念哈，就一桌是1000多，好贵哦，从来没吃过那么贵3桌饭。双11，我们所有的小伙伴都很辛苦，因为我和贝英军去尼泊尔也没有吃顿饭喂了哈大家，这次补起哈，顺便马上都要双12了，双12我们还要做功课季，还有很多事情要做，也给大家打打气，加加油哈！今天晚上一定要吃好多哈，哈哈哈！来给大家说一下，你今天来干嘛呀？
今天来吃羊肉。
吃啥羊肉？
我不要吃羊肉，我爸爸不准我吃。
为什么爸爸不准你吃羊肉？
因为我要咳嗽。
因为你要咳嗽啊？